And this would put a permanent constraint on the price of oil. It would never be able to go above $50 a barrel again because they would face a competitive constraint. Right now there's no competitive constraint. Yes, the price has dropped to below 50 right now, but that's because of a worldwide economic collapse induced by the OPEC raid on the world economy earlier this decade. But, the OPEC, they met in December, and they took 4 million barrels a day off the world market. Why? In order to tighten that collar, so that as soon as the economy tries to recover, the price of oil will shoot right back over $100 a barrel again. Pow, like that. So just get the picture on this, folks. Okay, November, December, the world's leaders are in a panic. They're holding meetings everywhere. How are we going to get out of this mess? How do we save our economies? These guys are holding meetings, figuring out how they can slam us as soon as we try to get off the mat. Pow, slam us right back down. That's what they've got in store for us. Okay, if we don't break out of their control. Now, when I propose this, sometimes people raise the objection that, look, if you did this, you'd create a bigger market in this country for ethanol than the American farmer could possibly ever produce. That's true. That is good. What that means is that we can give the American farmer all the business he can possibly handle and then drop our tariff barriers against Latin American sugar ethanol. Okay, and that means opening up an enormous market for them here. Ditto for Africa vis-a-vis Europe and South Asia vis-a-vis Japan. You're talking about creating a tremendous advanced sector market for third world agricultural produce. So what you're putting in place is an enormous engine for world development, uplifting entire continents out of poverty. I mean, if you've got to get the picture of the obscenity of the current situation, in foreign exchange to pay for overpriced oil to the Saudis. Okay, what this would do is allow them not only to make their own fuel, but to get a piece of the action of the world fuel business and obtain enormous income for development. And what that means for us is instead of selling off our banking system to Saudi princes, we could be selling tractors to Africa. Okay, so it means that an enormous amount of money that is now being gone to fund evil could instead go to fund good. Other consequences, the terrorist funding would be curtailed, the threat of superpower confrontation over the Middle East would be mitigated because it would no longer be so strategically critical, and global warming would be countered, and conventional pollution would be reduced as well. Okay, there's a myth that's been circulated that by a person named David Pimentel. He gets quoted endlessly in the Wall Street Journal and other publications. Wall Street Journal, by the way, is 5.6% owned by Prince bin Talil of Saudi Arabia. Okay, that gives you a sense of the corruption of our political system that has been going on as a result of these takeovers. But they constantly quote Pimentel as saying it takes more fuel to make the ethanol than the ethanol that you get. Now, in fact, Pimentel's been refuted in the refereed scientific literature. Here's the relevant citation from Science, January 2006, Farrow et al. And this, by the way, is reprinted in my book, which they have. Barnes & Noble's here in the exhibit hall afterwards. If you want to get a copy of the book, you buy it, I'll sign it. Barnes & Noble's will make money. Everybody will be happy. But anyway, what they showed is that it takes more than 10 times as much petroleum to make a given amount of ethanol, given amount of fuel as gasoline as it does as ethanol. Another myth that was circulated, last February when oil first crossed $100 a barrel, the oil cartel, through a PR firm called Glover Park, which they control, because Glover Park is, in fact, is registered with the U.S. Department of Justice as a paid agent of the government of the United Arab Emirates. Okay, they released this campaign saying the ethanol program is causing global starvation. Okay, it in fact is totally false. As a matter of fact, as a result of the ethanol program, U.S. corn production has been massively stimulated. Here's the figures that show it. Okay, 2002, American farmers produced 10 billion bushels of corn. They used 1 billion to make ethanol. They had 9 left over for food and feed. 2007, they produced 14.5 billion bushels of corn. They used 3 to make ethanol. They had 11.5 left over for food and feed. So the amount of ethanol they produced tripled. The amount of corn left over for food and feed available increased by 30%. And in fact, U.S. corn exports in 2007 were the largest in history, and they were even bigger in 2008. So this was just black propaganda. Food prices went up because two reasons. One is because of petrodollar speculation on the commodities exchanges, and the second because of fuel prices. Okay, that's why the price of fish is up. Not because of the corn ethanol program, but because of the price of fuel for the fishing boats, and the price of fuel affects transport costs, which radically affects retail food prices. Okay. I'm going to come back to this point. World development. Biggest problem in the world today is not terrorism. It's not global warming. It's poverty. Okay? Poverty kills hundreds of millions of people a year. Okay? This is serious. Now, let's look at this. 2007, Saudi Arabia, with a population of 24 million people, 1 in 6 of whom work. That's true. 85% of the Saudi population is on welfare. All the real work in the kingdom is done by slave laborers brought in from Pakistan and the Philippines or somewhere like that. Okay, they reaped $240 billion in profits from their oil exports. Last year it was 400. In the same year, Kenya, population 36 million, slightly larger than Saudi Arabia, but comparable. The majority of whom work. They earned $3 billion in foreign exchange from a variety of exports across a variety of fields of endeavor. A substantial fraction of which they had to pay for overpriced oil imports from OPEC. So distributed elsewhere, the oil export profits of Saudi Arabia alone could double the foreign exchange of 80 countries comparable to Kenya. Now, Kenya, by the way, is not one of the world's poorest countries. In fact, it's not even listed by the UN as one of the world's 50 poorest countries. It's a middle-of-the-road, average workaday, third-world country. Just kind of picked it randomly. So, what you're talking about here is an enormous amount of money. You're $1,500 billion on OPEC. Let's say a portion of that, $600 billion, could be redirected to third-world agriculture. That would be 10 times the total foreign aid in the world. That is, if you take the foreign aid, not just the American foreign aid, but the United Nations, UNESCO, and UNICEF, and the World Health Organization, and the Europeans, many of which have very generous foreign aid programs, and the Red Cross, and the Catholic Church, and Oxfam, and Christian Aid, and all the rest, put together is $60 billion a year in foreign aid in the world. Okay? This would be 10 times that. What you're talking about here is a sufficient financial engine to seriously address the issue of global poverty, not on a symbolic basis, but on a real and very substantial basis. That is what is possible here if we open up the world fuel market to alcohols. Here's proof it can be done. There's one country that is taking this seriously, that's Brazil. Okay, 1980. Okay, Brazil was 80% dependent on foreign oil. The U.S. was 35% dependent. Today, the U.S. is over 60% dependent. Brazil is 0. 100% of cars being sold in Brazil right now are flex fuel cars. 50% of all vehicle fuel sold in Brazil is ethanol. Now, it's true they had some oil strikes there too. They did some offshore development. But if that was all they did, they'd still be 40% dependent on foreign oil. Okay? The alcohol fuels are better for the environment. Okay, they burn much cleaner than gasoline. They have lower particulate emissions. There's been a very substantial improvement in air quality in Brazil as a result of their switch to ethanol. They contain no carcinogens. Ethanol advocates sometimes make a big deal of the fact that they don't like methanol because it's toxic. Well, so is gasoline. You don't want to drink gasoline. But methanol, ethanol is unique in that it is the only fuel that you can eat. Okay, but the methanol, you should know, lest you get too freaked out about it, its toxicity. You should recognize that windshield wiper fluid is 1/3 methanol, and every year we dump billions of gallons of it directly into the environment. That is where it goes after you send it off your windshield. And it causes no environmental degradation whatsoever because it's water soluble and the Earth's a water world. And so spills of ethanol or methanol cannot cause permanent water pollution because they dilute to insignificant concentrations in the Earth's hydrosphere and then are biodegraded, as opposed to petroleum, which always floats on water and therefore can cause pollution and is very long lasting. Exxon Valdez had been filled with ethanol. You'd have a few drunk sea otters for a couple of days, and then after that you couldn't detect it in the environment. But the oil is still there, killing the otters today.